All right, guys, this video is actually going to review something we did way back in quarter 1, and it was actually the very first unit we did in the year. So we learned something about functions, which, quick explanation, is function is an input-output machine. Our functions looked like this, where it had a y equals m, which was a number, x plus b, which was also a number. So we had these input-output machines where we would plug things into the function, things would come out, and then we would graph it, and they would make linear functions, which means our graphs would look like straight lines. So what we talked about way back in quarter 1 was that the number in front of the x, this m, was something called slope or rate of change. So those two phrases mean the same thing. And basically, the slope describes the pattern that's happening in the function. The b is where our line is going to cross the y-axis. So I'm going to go through some examples really quick to review how we use those pieces of information to actually look at a graph and get some information from it. So the first example, I'm going to zoom in here, is we have this function y equals 1/2 x minus 1. So hopefully you can see that. Maybe I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. There we go. And in the graph, we have a graph of the function. We have a table of ordered pairs that helped us graph the function, but there's some things I want to point out about what this function tells us by the 1/2 and the -1. So one of the things we talked about is this -1 at the end is actually where the graph crosses the y-axis. So we said that this number over here is the y-intercept. So this is where the graph is crossing the y-axis. So if you look at the actual graph, I'm just going to abbreviate that. If you actually look at the graph, our graph is crossing the y-axis at -1 right here. So the function actually tells us where that's going to happen. The 1/2 is describing the pattern we use to get to the next dot on the graph. So 1/2 means I go up 1, that's an up arrow, sorry, and then I go right 2. So it's always an up movement. The bottom number is either left or right depending on positive. So because this is positive, I'm moving right 2. So from here I go up 1, so up 1 over 2. And that takes me to the next point on the line. So when I said that the slope describes the pattern is the 1/2, up 1 over 2. So I can keep repeating that and it'll keep taking me to the next point on the line. So that is the pattern. Remember, we made these steps that look like triangles to help us find the next point. I could do the same thing if I was trying to travel the other way. So this pattern repeats up and to the right and down and to the left to create this straight line. The table itself also tells us two pieces of information. So first of all, 0, -1, that's the y-intercept. So the table will tell you the y-intercept also. So right here is the y-intercept. It also shows you the slope. So one of the things we did with the tables, we said, okay, to get from -1 to 0, I'm adding 1. So -1 plus 1 is 0. Then 0 plus 1 is 1. So my y values are going up by 1. And then the x values on the other side are going up by 2. So in the table, not only does it tell us the y-intercept, but it also tells us the pattern that we're using to find the next point on the line. So to get the fraction 1/2, it's the y change, change in the y, over the change in the x. So that's where our fraction comes from in the function. So the table shows it as well as the graph showing it. So I'm going to show you another example with a different kind of fraction. So let me get out of this one. And we'll go to the next example. So let me again zoom in a little bit here and take a look at this one. So this one says -2/3 x plus 2. So again, the plus 2, this number on the end, tells us where it crosses the y-axis. So my graph crosses the y at a positive 2. And again, it's always where it crosses the y. That's what that number always tells us. This pattern over here tells us, well, how are we going to get to the next line? So the top number is always an up movement. So we're going to go up 2, always. And then because there's a negative, we're going to move left. So that's how we're going to apply the negative. So from the y-intercept, I go up 2, left 3. And that takes me to the next point. And again, I can repeat this pattern again to get to the next point. So up 2, left 3, and there's another point on the line. The table, again, tells us the same information. 0, 2 is my y-intercept. Just like the function said it, my table's telling me my y-intercept as well. I'm also going to see the pattern in the table. My y's are going down by 2. So I'm decreasing by 2 on the y side. And on the left side, the x's, I'm going up by 3. So my fraction is coming from the y value, the change in the y, so this over this. So negative 2 over 3 is the slope or rate of change in front of the x. So I'm going to show you one more example where we're going to take those two pieces of information and actually graph. So this is the last one I'm going to do. And hopefully after watching this video, it kind of brings back some memories, I hope. And that way, when we get back into functions again, you'll kind of remember the pieces that we did. So here's our function, y equals 3x minus 1. So first thing that we want to remember is that this number out on here on the end is where it crosses the y-axis. So I'm going to put a point right on negative 1 on the y-axis. So my line has to cross there. Now, the one thing I want you to notice is this number isn't a fraction like my other two examples were, but we said you can take a whole number and make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So this is my pattern. This is my rate of change. This is my slope. This pattern is going to tell me how to find the other points that are on this line. So again, I always move up. The top number is always an up movement. The bottom number tells me whether I'm moving left or right. So positive 1 means move to the right 1 place. So from the y-intercept, I go up 1, 2, 3 over 1. So there's my next point right here. And I can repeat the pattern again. Up 3 over 1. And once I have 2 or 3 points, I can actually draw a line. Let me get my line tool here so I can try to make some things straight, if it'll let me do that. So I can connect the points and get my function that creates a straight line. So this graph is a graph of 3x minus 1, going through negative 1, going up 3 and over 1 to get the pattern where the rest of the dots are going to show up. So that's what we did back in quarter 1. We're going to come back to it. Any homework that you might do or any POWs that you might see or any review we do, hopefully you can go back to this video, check it out anytime you need to, and hopefully it'll remind you of how we were graphing with the pieces in the function. If you have any questions, see me and I'll see you later.